All right, welcome back everyone to Hall 2. I hope you had a wonderful lunch break. Christian is still sort of like swallowing the last bits of his lunch.
Exactly.
As one should. Like 1 hour is too little time, people. It's too little. You want to get your, your sandwiches and then also some vegetables and maybe some fruit and then also drink something. It's just too little time. Anyway, talking about time, let's continue to next talk. Because in this talk, Christian will explain the objective of PWA and Project Fugu and show how to add superpowers to your apps and who doesn't want to have superpowers in their apps. Because if you're unaware, Project Fugu is a multi-vendor effort that aims to bridge the gap between platform-specific apps and web applications by introducing powerful capabilities such as file systems or clipboard access. Christian is a Microsoft MVP, a Google developer expert, participant of W3C Web Applications Working Group, and didn't list any of his hobbies for me to talk about. So, Christian, the stage is yours whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Also, thanks everyone now joining here. The next topic, as we've heard, is about cross-platform application development, which is basically a topic that I follow for, I think, 10 years now, or 8 to 10 years, something like that. And basically my favorite approach how to implement cross-platform applications are PWAs. That is an application model that was invented like something in 2014, 2015 or so. And since its inception, it only got better over time. And today I want to show you what this application model is capable of. And I think the best idea or the best way to show this is by a demo. And the cool thing is that this demo not only works on my machine, but also you can try it out on your machine. And the cool thing is that it doesn't matter which operating system you use. So the demo that I will show you next works on Firefox and in Safari and in Edge and in Chrome. And it does so on macOS and Linux and Windows and on the mobile operating systems, so iOS, iPadOS, and Android, all using one code base. So I've written this application once, and now I'm able to use it on all of those different different browsers and operating systems. And the demo that I want to talk about, okay, give me a second, now it's working, is Paint.js. And if you want to try out that demo for yourself, you can simply open paint.js.org on your favorite device. So for example, if you're following virtually now, you can just open a new tab, right, and enter paint.js.org there. So I give you a couple of seconds to do that in order, for when you want to try out that yourself. And then I will follow suit. Yeah, basically what Paint.js is it's a clone of a very well-known traditional productivity application, and that is Paint. To be precise, the Paint in the version for Windows 95, because this is what I used when I was a little kid. And I used this application to draw images, and I loved like the variety of tools and actions that this application offers. And yeah, basically a main point for productivity applications like this is that they have this traditional file-based workflow. So you create a new document, you change something, in that case, draw something, you save it as a file into the user's local file system. And then in the Explorer, you can double click it, Paint will open again, you can modify it, save it, it's updated in the file system, and so on. That's what productivity applications typically do. Also, you can interact with the system's clipboard. Same for Paint.js. We will be able to share files with other applications and register for file extensions so that File Explorer or Finder, in the case of macOS, which I use, will recognize that your PWA can be used in order to edit a file from the file system. And of course, the application should also look and feel platform specific, and that's what this demo application does. So let's have a look at the demonstration. So therefore, I'm using Microsoft Edge Beta. That is like a beta version, as it says, right, of Microsoft Edge. So things may break occasionally. They should work in the stable version though. But I'm using this to have a separate browser profile, so to say, that I can use. Now, the idea of a PWA is that its life starts all in the browser. So if you never ever want to use this application again, you simply click the X right next to the tab, and you can forget that this application existed in the first place, because PWAs simply start their life in the browser. And here in the browser, basically the main functionality set of this application already works. So you can, for example, let me increase the size a bit. You can, for example, draw things, right? So this is what I used to do as a kid, like draw a sun here at the top, and some birds maybe, right? And you could now be creative and add many, many more things. Now that is great, right? But you may want to use Paint more often now. And so in that case, you may want to get a little bit faster access to this application. And in order to do so, you can now install this PWA. This is possible on desktop using the Chromium-based browsers, so that is Microsoft Edge and Chrome. And here in the address bar, you can click the install icon. When you click this, you see a permission prompt or a confirm prompt that asks, do you really want to do this? And if you click yes, then the application will launch in its own window. Let me bring it over here. Now, this is still just a browser tab, right? But now it appears as if it would be a platform-specific application. For example, here in the system menu, where macOS shows the name of the application, we will now no longer see Microsoft Edge, which is still powering this app, like in the background, but we will see Paint. If I open or bring over the dock menu here, you will see that Paint got its own entry in the dock, on the same level as Microsoft Edge Beta that installed this application in the first place. And also, if we use like the app switcher, we will now also see the Paint app, looking as if this would be a platform-specific application. Now, that's not everything, but installing is one thing, right? But the other thing is that that this application is also offline capable. And that means not only that the app will continue to run if I would go offline now, which I can't do because I'm streaming to you, but it would work. But what it also means is that the application now launches super fast. Let me try if we can add a new window maybe. No, I guess we can't. Or let me see if we can do it here. Here we can. So if I click the new window now, see what happens. Boom. Did you see that? Let me try it again. Oops. Bring back the Paint app and say new window. Boom. The application is instantly there. So although this still comes from a web origin, so paint.js.org, you can see that the application launches instantly. That is due to an offline copy. So we do not have to talk to an actual server, because we keep a local copy of this PWA on our system. And that way, it's not only offline capable, but starts super fast, like always, even if you have a connection. And that's like the next level, right? So we can build great applications that work just fine in a tab. And the next level is adding PWA capabilities to it, and that means installability and offline capability. But now, once developers have seen that, they wanted to do even more stuff on the web. Again, this is a productivity application. So we want to be able to, for example, interact with the file system or the clipboard. And this is possible thanks to an initiative called Project Fugu. And with the help of this initiative, we can now do almost everything that the old Paint client for Windows 95 was able or capable to do, with exactly one exception. But we will get to this. Okay, let me see what we can do. First of all, I just shrink down Edge a bit because it's a little bit disturbing, like the news content that you can see there. And I'll bring over a Finder window that shows the desktop. Now, for example, what I can do now is save this file to the desktop by clicking the Save As menu. And now the desktop will open, and I can change the name of the document. Let's call it Dev Days Europe and save it. And now you can see on the right-hand side that we created this file. We can also now read it at the top of the window, and it has been created on the desktop. Here it is, right? Side note, like the canvas is really big, right? That's why we see this this big teal area here. Now, that is not too surprising because you could do this before, but what is definitely new now is that you can, for example, change the color of the sun and save it. And now, as you have seen in the Finder window, the color of the sun has changed. So basically, we can now keep a handle to the file. Let me put it back to yellow and save it. And you can modify the content of a file that you have created before or opened before. And that is something that is now definitely new on the web. What else can we do? We can, for example, select a portion of the image, let's say this little bird here, and select the copy function. Now, when I click copy, I'm able to, for example, paste this to another application. So, for example, if I bring PowerPoint here, which shows the slides that you've just seen, I can now simply paste the selection that I did in the Paint application. And of course, this also works vice versa. So we can also copy an image and paste it to the Paint application. So basically the way back. What else can we do? We can, for example, add a text box here. And the thing is that on the web, up until now, you couldn't get the list of all installed fonts on the system. But of course, for applications like Paint, this is very important because we want to be able to use all systems that we have installed on our machine. And so this is now possible thanks to a new API also introduced by Project Fugu. And I trigger this once I click the fonts list for the first time. And now you will see like a confirm prompt that asks if it's okay that the application gets access to the list of all installed fonts. And if I say allow and click the box again, I will now get the entire list of installed fonts on the system, which is also very nice and of course important for productivity applications like Photoshop, Paint, Word, PowerPoint, and so on. Okay, what else can we do? We can also share this image or this drawing with other people using the send menu, and this will bring up. Okay, so sometimes it crashes. So let me try if it works. Yeah, okay. So that's like the behavior in the beta version, but we can do it in the tab. So if I have a drawing here, I want to share that, I can click the send button, and now like the native share dialog will come up, and I can then choose, for example, to send this as an iMessage to somebody or use AirDrop in order to share it to someone else. So all of that stuff is possible using this capability, which is called the Web Share API. Now, I compared what you can do with like the old version of Paint and with the current or with this web-based version of Paint, and it turns out you can do everything except one feature, and that is assigning the drawing that you have as your wallpaper. So there's no API on the web right now that allows you to set an image as a wallpaper. I guess that's also for very, very good reasons. I'm not sure if we actually need this API on the web. But apart from that, to be honest, niche functionality, everything else works. Printing, full screen view, loading color palettes, saving them, and so on and so forth. Everything else is perfectly possible to do on the web now. All right, and that is basically level 3 of the maturity of web applications. Okay, next couple of minutes, I want to show you how I implemented this, like using a very I don't know, a very high level overview and just the important points, so to say. And we will move forward using exactly those levels that I talked about. So building a great web application that just works fine in the browser, then adding PWA capabilities, offline capability, installability, adding even more platform-specific capabilities, file system access, clipboard access, and so on. And then how to ensure that also users of other and older browsers can continue to use your application. This is what progressive enhancement means. Okay, first of all, the Paint application again, it's a web-based app. And for the use case that we have here, so drawing stuff on a canvas, on a 2D bitmap, we can use an HTML5 element called canvas. That has been introduced, I think, over 10 years ago, at first in WebKit. And what this element gives us is a plain bitmap, so a 2D rectangle, so to say, that we can draw on. And we can draw on this rectangle using so-called contexts. There's a 2D context for 2D operations, which I use here. And then there's a 3D context called WebGL and WebGL 2.0 that allow you to draw 3D images on this canvas. And the cool thing is that all of that can be done in a hardware accelerated way. And this element is supported from all browsers, from IE9 up. So basically on all browsers that are around there. Stuff that you can do with it is, for example, here, a 3D visualization that is a demo of Three.js. It draws some cubes. You can build games with that, also some 2D games in that case, right? That is Line Rider, I believe, a very popular game back when I studied. I love to use this. And of course, as we are dealing with Paint here, I'm using the 2D context behind the scenes, which allows doing stuff like draw a rectangle, draw a path, and so on, fill it or stroke it, and so on. That is what's being used under the hood. And now the good thing is that all of those interfaces that we are using here are supported on all browsers. So for example, the canvas element is again supported since IE9. And with canvas element also the 2D rendering context. Apart from that, I'm also using pointer events that can just access or read any input method. So it doesn't matter if you're using your pen or a finger, your finger, ideally, or a mouse in order to draw something, because I'm using that abstracted interface that just gives me all. So again, the idea is write it once and use it on as many operating systems and browsers, so platforms, as possible. And so what you should remember is that you should always build apps for the browser, because if they run in the browser, they will not only run there, but can also be installed to user system, can be packaged as an Electron app or like a Cordova application and so on. So once you have an application that works properly for the browser, it will also work on all of the other platforms. Okay, that was level 1. Now let's move on to level 2, and that was PWAs. So now we want to give this web application that just works fine in the tab some first platform-specific capabilities. Again, in that case, that was installability and offline capability. Again, the term PWAs was coined in around 2014 at Google back at the day. And you will not find any W3C specification that is called PWA. That's really just a marketing term, so to say, for developers. There is other concrete technical specifications that basically form PWAs. So rather, PWA is an umbrella term, and we consider a website to be a PWA if it fulfills most of the following 10 characteristics. The first one is it should be responsive. So you should be able to resize the window, for example, on a desktop system, and the application should remain usable regardless of the dimensions. It should work well on a mobile device, also on a tablet, and if it makes sense, maybe even up to like a large television screen that you have. Then applications should be, PWAs, should be linkable. That means we should be able to copy a link or to copy the link from the address bar, give it to a colleague, and if they click it, they will see the very same thing, right? So in that case, I gave you the link to the Paint application. You entered it, and it just works. And in some cases, that can even be made possible for certain records, right? For example, a record from the database. Then you have something like, I don't know, todoapp.com/ Fuba, right? And if I copy this link to a colleague and they click it, they will then even see that entity that I shared with them. Discoverability means that we can distinguish a PWA from a normal website. That's possible thanks to something that is called a web app manifest, but we will see that in a second. Then they should be installable. You've seen that before. Should be able to be added to the list of installed applications on desktop systems or to the home screen on mobile systems. Then they should be app-like. This means they should look and behave as if they were a platform-specific application, using, for example, certain menus or gestures or UI elements that you know from apps. They should not look like a standard website. Then they should be connectivity independent. That means they should work regardless of the network connectivity. So, for example, also when the user is offline, but also give us this very fast launch behavior that we have seen for the Paint demo. Then they should be fresh. Connectivity independence means that we will have to store parts of the application on a client-side cache. And then, of course, we can release new versions in parallel, and we want to make those new versions accessible to the user as fast as possible. This is what fresh means. Next characteristic is safe. And that means that PWAs should, or in that case even must be, sent via HTTPS so that nobody can manipulate the response in between. Then PWAs should be able to receive push messages. This is now also possible to do on all platforms. So macOS, Linux, Windows, iOS, iPadOS, and Android with the release of iOS 16.4 and iPadOS 16.4. And progressive means, although we have those modern new capabilities, we still want to be able to run this application in browsers that do not support certain things, right? So there was a time when, for example, connectivity independence was not yet supported by all browsers. But your application, remember, just runs great in a tab. And if it can run great in a tab, it should do exactly that and offer those extra capabilities to those users that use a more up-to-date browser. Now, the two core specifications, which you will find a specification for, so Web App Manifest, for example, is at W3C. Yeah, correct. Sorry. And those two specifications are Web App Manifest and the Service Worker. The Web App Manifest, that takes care of the installability. So that means this now helps us to distinguish a web app from a website. It's nothing really special. It's just a JSON file that you add to a website that is meant to be used as a PWA. And this file can then be used by a browser, for example, to determine whether this application should be installable or not. Let's have a look at a very simple PWA. That's it, right? Sorry, a very simple manifest. That's it already. And so, for example, it contains names of the application. Remember, it's cross-platform. So on a home screen of a mobile operating system, we don't have that much space. So there's a short name version for the app. And on a desktop system, we can use the long version, name. You can define the color of the status bar or window bar. In my case, I use this Windows 95 dark blue. That can be done using the theme color property. You can define the icons for this application, which URL should be launched when you click the icon on the home screen or in the programs list. Different display modes. Standalone means it opens in an own window. And on mobile operating systems, it would not show any browser Chrome. So basically the behavior of normal apps. You can add shortcuts. So that is when you right-click an application in the dock, for example, or in the taskbar, or if you long press an application on a mobile operating system. That's all in shortcuts. And the second specification is the so-called service worker. The service worker is now responsible for keeping your application offline, accepting push messages and displaying push notification banners. That is what the service worker does. And basically a service worker is just a piece of JavaScript, right? It's just a snippet, so to say, a JavaScript snippet that is executed in its own thread and will be registered by your website. And once it's registered and installed and activated, it will act as a controller, proxy, or interceptor for your website. And what this means is that the service worker will be able to intercept any network requests that are sent, basically over the network. And then the service worker also has a cache where it can store responses in. And combining those two technologies, so acting as a proxy and having a cache, now allows us to implement the offline capability, because if we load the entire contents of the app to the cache on the first visit, we'll then be able to load the application directly from our local cache. And the cool thing is that the service worker can even wake up when the website is closed. So this could even happen when, for example, on iOS, when you've closed Safari, so the app is not even open, so the browser is not even open, but a push message comes in, your service worker will be waked up and deal with the push message. So typically that means you want to show a push message banner to the user, and all of that is possible with the help of service workers. So this here again shows how the service worker implements offline capability. So here on the left-hand side, there's your website, and on the right-hand side, there's the network, so to say. And the service worker is registered by your website. So it forms its own entity. And so from this point on, once the service worker takes control over your website, it will be able to intercept all outgoing requests of your website. And again, all outgoing requests that includes, for example, requests to CDNs, right, to get Bootstrap or that Google font that you want to use. It will be able to intercept all of those requests, store them in the cache, or read them from the cache. And that way you can implement offline capability. And it doesn't, from this point on, it doesn't matter if you still have a connection to the internet or not. Of course, it depends on what the application then does, right? If it needs to connect to a server from time to time, then of course, for those scenarios, you need to be online, but everything else can be done locally. And this does not only include HTTP requests and responses, but also includes structured data, JSON files, or binary files even that are created. They can also be stored on the user system and then synchronized the next time the user is online. Let's have a look at where those capabilities are present. Service workers are supported by all major browsers, so the Chromium-based ones, Chrome, Edge, Opera, Vivaldi, Brave, and whatnot. Also supported by Safari, so WebKit, and by Gecko and Firefox. And this means that offline capability is available on all of those platforms shown here, so on all recent browsers. Installability, that depends. So installability is possible in the Chromium-based browsers regardless of the operating system. On Safari, on iOS and iPadOS, installation is possible from within Safari, but not on macOS. So you cannot install PWAs from Safari on macOS. And I don't have any information if that will change. Also, installation is not possible on desktop versions of Firefox, but only in the version for Android. Yeah, and then push notifications, they are now supported on all platforms, again, with the release of iOS and iPadOS version 16.4, not too long ago. Now we also have the ability for PWAs to receive push messages on all platforms. Just a little side note, for iOS and iPadOS, it's even required that the user installs the app to the system, right? So adds it to the home screen. And this requirement is not in effect like for the other platforms. In those cases, you can also just have a tab, right? A not installed application send push messages, which you may have used already. Okay, that was level 2. Now, next up is level 3. So adding even more capabilities to it. So beyond offline capability and installability. And this is now where this magical thing called Project Fugu comes in. This is, as we have heard, a joint effort by the Chromium contributors, so Google, Intel, and Microsoft, that want to bridge the gap between platform-specific apps and web applications. And that means we want to add more and more capabilities to the web, making wrapper solutions such as Electron, for example, which I'm sure you use every day, right? Less relevant. If you use Slack or Microsoft Teams, or at least on macOS, or Discord, or WhatsApp Web, or Visual Studio Code, all of those applications are Electron apps. All of these applications are web-based at the core, but need Electron in order to access certain platform-specific APIs. And in order to make that less relevant, also Project Fugu was created. Yeah, there's also a story to the code name. So Fugu is a very famous Japanese dish. It's cool because it like tickles on the tongue, and that is because this fish is poisonous. So if you prepare that dish wrong, then you'll probably die. But done right, it's a very nice experience. And this is essentially what Fugu wants to say us, right? We need those APIs. We need file system access. We need clipboard access. And in the wrong hands, this can be potentially dangerous. So essentially, we need to be careful how we implement those capabilities in order that nobody dies. There's a very long list of capabilities that are the objective of Project Fugu, so to say. If you want, you can have a look at the Fugu API tracker. This list is really, really long. Here on the screenshot, we see stuff like Web Bluetooth API that allows you to access Bluetooth devices, the Web USB API to talk to USB devices, and so on. Web Share API that I've shown you before. Async clipboard that I've shown you before, and this list is really long. And there's more APIs that are released with like every other version of Chromium-based browsers. So if you want to know which APIs are part of Project Fugu, then feel free to refer to this list. And if you are missing one API on the web, if you need something for your application, then you can even report this to the Fugu team, and then it may be added to this long list of APIs. Again, remember that all of this is about cross-platform applications. So what we do not want to do is do stuff that you would have to do if you are using Xamarin, for example, right? So if I'm on Windows, I want to call this. If I'm on macOS, I want to call that. Instead, using Project Fugu, all you get as a developer is exactly one API. And this API either exists or it does not exist. So in the case of the Web Share API, regardless of the platform, doesn't matter if it's Safari on macOS or Chrome on Windows or, I don't know, Edge on Linux, it will always be navigator.share. And then the browser takes care of then calling the actual platform-specific API in the background. And that's easy to do for the browser because it is compiled for a certain target operating system, and then the browser vendors have to do exactly that, what I just described. Say something like, if I'm on Windows, then call the data transfer manager. If I'm on macOS, then we will call the NS sharing service picker, and so on. Okay, I want to quickly demo some of the Fugu APIs. So one, for example, is the file system access API that I've talked about. Very important for those apps that deal with this traditional file-based workflow, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Photoshop, VS Code, and so on. That is possible with the help of the File System Access API, currently only supported by Chrome and Edge, and Safari and Firefox will not support this API for now. There's some fallback mechanisms though, so that you can also make it at least somehow or somewhat possible on the other browsers as well. It's just one API again, show open file picker in that case, and there you can define which files you accept, for example, and then you will get access to this handle that I talked about earlier, which allows you to, for example, overwrite an existing file that the user opened for your app or in your application. Next API is async clipboard API. That is read and write access to and from the clipboard. In that case, so I've shown you the copy case before. Again, reading would also be possible, but when you try to read from the clipboard, you first have to give permission. So the browser asks for permission, and you first have to confirm this, because that, of course, remember the Fugu, is something that is privacy sensitive, right? You could have passwords in your clipboard or bank account data and so on. So if you want to read from the clipboard, the user will at least once see a pop-up that asks if the application is allowed to do that. Here's how that API looks. This API is now implemented in Chrome, Edge, and in Safari. Firefox only implements the write text method. Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. So if you want to write text, then you call navigator clipboard write text. If you want to read text, you call navigator clipboard read text. If you want to write arbitrary data, as I did, right, with the image, you call the write method, and reading arbitrary data is provided by us through the read method. And then there's the file handling API. Oh, I didn't even show that, sorry. So let me bring back the Finder window, because what our PWA also did is, if you right-click the application now and say open with, it now registered as a compatible program for PNG files. And so if I click Paint again, you will see that like the Paint icon started jumping around, which is the case how macOS shows that, right? And if you now confirm this prompt, again, as you've seen, there will be some permission prompts, then the application will load again, right? And load with that image that I've selected from my Finder application. That is the file handling API, also very nice, and of course also very important for productivity apps. And now this has two parts. First of all, there's an extension to the manifest. So you have to declare in the manifest file that contains the name and the image and so on, which files you support. And once the user selects your application, there's also like a runtime API called the so-called launch queue, which will then give you access to the files that you open the application with. Okay, and here's the browser support again. So async clipboard API is supported in Chrome, Edge, and Safari. Firefox only supports write text, and file system access is only supported by the Chromium-based browsers on desktop. And there's no sign that that will change for Safari and Firefox, at least for now. And same thing for the file handling API. Okay, and the last thing is progressive enhancement. Now that's a very interesting term, right? But actually it's quite simple. What it means is that we should like only use the functions of a system that exist. And using that way, we can offer users of more modern browsers or of more powerful browsers a better experience, while the application will continue to run on older browsers. And so what that means, for example, we've learned that show, say, file picker is file system access API, not supported in Chrome and not supported in Firefox and Safari. So what we should do is not just blindly call this API, because that would break on those browsers, but instead we just check if the API is present. And if it is there, we use it, and then the users get the better experience. And if it is not there, we could either fall back to an alternative API that Webit and Firefox offer, for example, for the cases that I need, right? And if that API doesn't exist, you can also just disable or hide the functionality. Yeah, and if you combine all of those stuff, like this old write once, run anywhere dream finally comes true. So this Paint application, again, written exactly once, fixed every bug once, wrote every feature once, does not only run on the browsers, right? But if you so on those browsers you can see here, but also everywhere else that also ships with the browser, right? On the Nintendo Switch. I don't know if it has a browser actually, but on the Xbox, for example, or in cars or smart fridges that have a screen and offer a browser. And then it runs on all of the operating systems that are relevant. So on the mobile operating systems, Android, iOS, iPadOS, or on the desktop ones, macOS, Linux, and Windows. And again, write once, one PWA that works simply everywhere. If you would do that, then you would be in a good company, because Microsoft released PWA of Microsoft Visual Studio Code. Thanks to File System Access API, it allows you to open a workspace from your file system and create files, create directories, delete files, and so on, all from within your browser. And Adobe did the same with Photoshop. They put like a stripped down version of Photoshop in the browser to allow you to do the same things. And Microsoft and Adobe are not the only ones. So I was part of the content team for the 2022 Web Almanac, where we basically compare how much APIs are used. And what we found out was that the async clipboard API in 2021 was used on approximately 9% of all desktop websites, and in 2022 it was 10% already. And for file system access, that number is like even bigger, right? So in 2021 we had 29 desktop websites using it, and in 2022 it was over 2,000 already. So that is an increase of almost tenfold increase. If you want to know more about that, here's the link to the Web App Almanac. It's very interesting, I would say, for web developers like you and me. Okay, now I want to quickly summarize what we have seen, and then it's time for your questions. So in all new versions of Chromium-based browsers, there are new powerful APIs that are being shipped, and I'm sure there's also APIs that are interesting for you. So make sure to follow like Project Fugu and see what it adds to the web, and also like the other web interfaces that are added to the web platform. Some of them, sure, will only add minor finishing touches, but others will allow entire application categories to make the shift to the web. For example, just recently in Chromium-based browsers, WebGPU was shipped, which now allows us to run AI models directly in your browser, or to make 3D visualizations like even better. The Fugu process makes sure that capabilities are implemented in an interoperable way, so they can also be picked up and implemented by other browsers, which happened, for example, with the async clipboard API or WebShare. And make sure that they are implemented in a secure and privacy-preserving manner. So my call to action for you is, let's go and make the web a more capable platform. And with that being said, I'm open for your questions.
Awesome. That's a great call to action. I can't see any questions right now, but the stream is always a little bit behind. So I'm just going to ask my questions first. All right. So when you mentioned that it's a cross-vendor initiative, what other, who beyond or besides Google is working on this?
So there's Microsoft and Intel, Samsung Internet, and so on. But as you can see, that's basically all, or Igalia, for example, like a third-party implementer for browsers. So that is a project within like the Chromium team. And that's basically the companies and organizations working on that particular project.
Awesome. And is there any are there contributions welcomed outside of the big vendors, or?
Sure. Yeah. So essentially everyone could join, right? So maybe I'm a part of that project. I at least would consider myself so, right? By contributing feedback, for example, or trying out demos, testing like beta versions of specifications and so on. So everyone can join that is interested.
That is definitely
the mailing list is just open. So open for contributors. Yeah.
That's really good. So when it's about contributor experience, it's mostly throughout the mailing list is what people should join if they want to get involved?
I think, yes, mailing list is a good start, but I think maybe even more important would be like following the GitHub repositories of the YCG, so the Web Platform Incubator Community Group of W3C, because that's where all of the APIs will land at some point. So that is also like a great entry point. And also taking part in the discussions in the GitHub issues, for example, that's how I started contributing, I believe, because I just followed like the GitHub issues, put some comments there. That's how I started.
I love that. Do you think you could, because I don't see any more questions coming in, do you think you can share that link in the chat once you get out of this virtual studio thing.
Mhm.
I think it would be useful for people to figure out where to get started.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I love the examples. I spent way too much time on the on Paint in the browser. More time than I care to admit right now. And maybe the tab is still open, but we'll see about that. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope that you stay with us in Hall 2. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is all we got. Dreaming about a revolution in our minds. This is all we got.
Lock me out of this life institution. I am angry and high on illusions. Yes, I hate, but it's not a solution. Try my best, but I'm just a human. Oh, we don't need to say we're sorry. We don't need to worship ever stars. We don't need to say we're sorry. So where's the love?
This is all we got. Dreaming about a revolution in our minds. This is all we got. Talking about resolutions, getting high. We don't need a lot, and we don't care if we fuck it up. If it's what we got, then why not give it all we
I
got?
can see in your eyes you're defeated. Try to fool yourself till you believe